focus on the big story that New Delhi has been talking about and pitching for, which is climate finance. Climate finance commensurate to the challenges that the developing world faces. India had pitched for upwards of $1 trillion till 2030 to be the annual climate financing that should be made available to developing countries to ensure that they are able to meet the climate catastrophes, also plan for climate transition. That didn't happen because COP29 was being driven by the agenda and interests of the developed countries, something that hurts the interest of the global south, of the least developed countries, and those people who are likely to be most impacted by climate change. Let's first listen in to Chandni Raina, who represented India at COP29. We come back and talk more about what this means and what all can New Delhi do from here on.
Goal is too little, too distant. It is 2035. It's too far gone. Our 2030 estimates tell us that we need to do it at 1.3 trillion per year till 2030. But we have only been agreeable to have, or we have a proposal that talks about 300 USD billion mobilization goal. It does not address the needs and priorities of developing countries. The amount that is proposed to be mobilized is abysmally poor. It's a paltry sum. It is not something that will enable conducive climate action that is necessary for the survival of our country and for the growth of our people, their livelihoods. And I'm sorry to say that we cannot accept it.
Very strong words coming in from India at COP29. Let's get in Harjeet Singh, who was at Baku, a climate activist and a global engagement director of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. Thanks so much, Harjeet, for speaking to me on India Global. Tell us, what do you think of what came out of Baku?
We absolutely reject the outcome. It is a betrayal. The outcome is woefully inadequate. And as Indian delegation said, it was stage managed, and the way it was hastily gavelled through the proposal. In fact, in the whole process, developing countries were forced to agree to this dismal outcome. And the fact is, developing countries like India and even vulnerable countries have been completely left on their own. So big questions are being raised on the outcome, but also the process, the way it was run and the way it was stage managed. It doesn't really help us deal with the climate crisis. And as you said, finance is absolutely central to climate action and the ambition that we need to respond to the scale of the climate crisis. And what has been offered is pittance, and we don't even know whether this money is going to be real or not. So that's a huge challenge, and India has rightly raised the concerns and must.
Harjeet, you suspect even the $300 billion may not come? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. Because the language, if you read, it says calls on all actors to work together. So the obligation of developed countries is not defined. How do you trace? How do you track that finance? And the roadmap that it talks about now, because there was a huge pressure to talk about $1 trillion and beyond, there's a Baku to Belém roadmap, which talks about unlocking financial resources. What does that mean? What we need is grants and not loans. And that's exactly what developed countries have been offering. In fact, I would say they are rather making money from the climate crisis than meeting their obligations towards developing countries like India, like Nepal, like Malawi, and like Nigeria.
When you say that developing countries or least developed countries they need grants and not loans, help us understand that. Is most of the climate finance in the form of loans, and therefore even those cannot be repaid by the least developed countries, making the crisis even more acute?
You're absolutely right, Gaurie. In fact, by their own admission, the last $100 billion goal had 69% of the amount as loans. Now imagine we are living in a world where countries are already facing the debt crisis. As per ActionAid report, 93% of the climate vulnerable countries are facing the crisis or on the verge of it. That's the reality, and climate crisis is making it worse. So in that situation, you're asking countries and communities to borrow money to either repair the harm that has been done to them or prepare for climate impacts by borrowing money, which is double injustice. First, they are not responsible for the crisis. And second, now you are going to make them further more indebted because you're asking them to take loan and you are going to make money from this crisis. That's deeply unfair.
It is
And
unfair,
unjust.
unjust, and just something, this is like daylight robbery actually. But Harjeet, with the fact that COP29 hasn't addressed any of the concerns of the developing countries, what do you think lies the alternative? These weeks-long negotiations where nothing comes out of it, with high hopes, high expectations being completely shattered. What's the way out? Is there an alternative in terms of climate technology? Is there an alternative in terms of innovative financing models that need to be discovered?
So clearly this system needs a reform. And we cannot afford to abandon this critical platform because this is only one of the few that have been designed to ensure that all nations, regardless of their size or economic power, have an equal voice. But it is also clear that we need to reorient the system to serve the interests of the most vulnerable countries than of the fossil fuel lobbyists and polluters. And I must mention, there were more than 1,700 lobbyists moving around to influence the negotiations. And the fact is that historical polluters and their powers continue to overshadow the voices of smaller and frontline communities. So countries like Nepal and like Malawi and like India are not going to get sufficient support if we continue
Then final
with
question,
the same
Harjeet,
process.
let me ask you this. What is it that a country like New Delhi should do? Because it's not just speaking about itself, it's speaking on behalf of so many other least developed and developing countries. What should New Delhi now be doing?
India should continue to raise the issue. Let's not just make it a one-time challenge that we made to the presidency and to the system. It should mobilize other developing countries because it did get support when we voiced our concerns. And we should actually, next year, we are going to be developing our climate action plan, or what we call NDCs, nationally determined contribution. I think we should definitely challenge the rich countries that we will not be able to raise ambition unless and until money is provided and the money that has been offered is real. So next year is a crucial opportunity as we go to Brazil for the next COP. And now that we have this roadmap, there are
Yes.
opportunities, but also we should ask for a reform of this process and a new global framework that
Yes.
can tackle the issue of fossil fuels and moving towards renewable energy far, far more
Yes.
robustly. And that's why we are demanding a new fossil fuel
Right.
non-proliferation treaty to help countries like India.
Thanks, Harjeet, for giving us that perspective on an issue that's likely to impact all of humanity. Thank you so much for taking out the time to speak to me on India Global.